All right, everybody. Celtics Bucks on a Friday night. What else could you ask for? Well, how about a Green with Envy preview podcast? We got that for you here today. Celtics Bucks preview coming up next. Green with Envy. You guys know the deal by now. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. This time we got ourselves a preview podcast. This is your boy Will. We are checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today to get right into it, we got my friend here from Blue Wire, part of our Blue Wire family, host of the Gyro Step Podcast. We got my guy Ti Windisch to break down the Celtics and the Bucks. Ti, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. I mean, happy to be here with you, Will, on this terrific Green with Envy preview pod. And also, we got the news today as we record on Thursday. Chris Middleton, season debut in this game. So always excited when two teams this good, or at least one of them this good in the regular season, plus the Bucks, are going to square off. But to see Chris debut as well, extremely excited and feeling, just optimistic about this game.
Yeah, a little added spice, man. Let's start right there because that is the big news. Just came out from Bobby Marks earlier today. We're recording this here Thursday afternoon ahead of this game here. But Chris Middleton going to make his season debut against the Celtics Friday night. So let's start here, Ti, before we get into what the Bucks season has been to this point. Middleton coming back. What does it mean? And also, what do you expect out of him coming off of, and I always have to keep reminding people, he's coming off multiple ankle surgeries. You only get two of them, Ti. So both of those ankles had surgery on. What is the expectation for him?
Yeah, I think, relatively quiet, right? You're not going to expect him to come back and have like a 35-5 game here. I'm sure the minutes are going to be limited in some aspect. They certainly, Chris wasn't feeling totally right, certainly was kind of able to take his time coming back from that surgery. So I would expect it won't be an extremely short minutes restriction, but it may be, 15, 18, 20, somewhere in that range. The Bucks, I'm sure, will be tight-lipped. Well, maybe they won't. I'm not used to having Doc yet. Bud and Adrian Griffin, we never got anything. Doc is an open book. We found out about the ankle surgery because of Doc on a summer league broadcast. So maybe we will know, but right now we don't know. But I'm just expecting him to be the steadying force that he's been for the Bucks. I think the reason Chris Middleton is so important is there you just see, even with Giannis and Dame throughout games, there'll just be that kind of moment where things fall apart. Either those guys are off the court or you can tell, trying to rest for a couple of possessions and just let someone else do something. There's not really that strong connective tissue right now. There's good players. A lot of players have stood out and played well. There has not been another ball handler, another on-ball creator, scorer who can kind of, okay, let's carry us through these couple of minutes and then Giannis is ready to dunk again or Dame is ready to step back again. Middleton is that, and I think that is, as it's just adding a player of his caliber is obviously always going to help. The Celtics whole thing right now is like, let's just have more really good players, and that is always a good thing. I think that applies to every team. But additionally, like for what the Bucks are lacking right now, I think the two things are that third creator and the athletic big. Chris is not an athletic big man, but he does give you an elite third creator. So even if they just get a few minutes of that to help steady the ship, that's going to be a big impact for this Bucks team.
Yeah, you mentioned the word important. I think importance is really what I've looked at for Chris Middleton, especially when you go back to, and everyone loves to rehash, especially between our two teams, the Drew Holiday, Dame Lillard situation from last offseason. And, if you look at the Bucks team with Drew Holiday, like they were clearly lacking offensive punch. And I think, despite as much you guys love Drew, we're clearly loving having Drew Holiday as a part of our team. And the unintended consequence of making that offense for defense trade is then obviously not finding that third team, which may not have been available. I don't know what the reporting is on that. Like, it's unfortunate he ends up in the worst possible scenario for Bucks fans in Boston. But from an internal Bucks standpoint, it feels like to me that whole trade from the time it happened, my question was, I think it can work. Like obviously you're pairing Dame and Giannis. That's a beautiful thing. But Chris Middleton was the key to it, in my opinion, and always has. And his health was already a little bit questionable going into making that trade. We saw all last year, and I think it was one of the weirdest things for me was watching him, quote unquote ramp up throughout the season. And it was like, guys,
Yeah.
how long are we going to be doing this ramp for? I keep checking a box
Yeah.
score and he's playing under 25 minutes and he's been back for 2 months at this point. Like there's something not quite right here. But as a Celtics fan, I know at one point, I had to make the argument that the Bucks were still the most dangerous team because if Chris Middleton gets back to being Chris Middleton, that's where this works. This doesn't work. Nothing with the Bucks, in my opinion, works unless Chris Middleton is a version of the Chris Middleton we got, 2 now becoming 3 years ago, right? Like that's the version that is needed for this team to be as dangerous as they can be. And unfortunately, that version didn't show up until the first round of the playoffs when Giannis was out, and then Dame got hurt in that first round. That Middleton, I was like, this is the Middleton that scared me, that could make the Bucks competitive with the Celtics. But then he goes and has the double ankle surgery. And so, to all the points that you made, the ideal version of Chris Middleton, I think he fits those. Who knows coming off these surgeries? No one's seen him. But do you think that Middleton is still going to exist for this Bucks team?
I do. I think when he was doing the things in the playoffs that you're talking about, a lot of it was on, the ankles getting them fixed, right? I mean, he came back. The first ankle injury was Kevin Durant with hard closeout. And I'm not alleging anything here to be clear, but, Kevin Durant ends up under him. Yeah, exactly. He lands on KD and twists his ankle. He misses, I forget how many weeks with that. Comes back for the playoffs, and then Siakam under the basket. He lands on him and twists the other ankle. That's the thing. And, some people laughed at Chris. He's like, I'm not injury prone. These things just keep happening. I think he's right. Like, I think you could say, well, you're still injury prone. It's not like the same thing on Chris keeps breaking down. He has had all these unfortunate things, including the ankles, but on 2 hobbled ankles, and one of them recently, injured, he was still able to go out there and be this offensive engine for the Bucks without Dame, without Giannis. So I do think with Chris that I guess the silver lining of all the stuff he has struggled with is when he's out there on the court, he finds a way. He's not a player predicated on athleticism, right? He's one of the probably least athletic, gifted scorers in the league. I mean, he's crafty. He doesn't have to be open to make his shots. And we still have not seen, right now, Dame and Giannis are really firing on all cylinders together more than we've ever seen. Chris has never really benefited from that. They've played together last year, and they were really good when all 3 of them were on the court together last year. But I think this version of Dame and Giannis is better. It'll probably be a little bit of an acclimation process, getting used to Chris, but I also think he is kind of in that kind of Paul George-ish model of wing players where, I don't know, I think most teams can pretty quickly benefit from having a guy like this out on the perimeter. Right. There'll be some acclimation. Also, everyone on the team is very used to him, except for Taurean Prince and the extra new guys. But I think he can get at least close to that. And, I think they need a little less from him ideally than ever before. If any of these guys, if all 3 of these guys can be healthy, the main ones, I mean, that's the big thing for every team in the playoffs. It's ironic that Chris is the one who is always talked about with injuries, but as you say, Dame missed half the series, Giannis missed the whole series. So you never know these days in the league. It feels like who's going to be healthy or not. The Celtics were able to do it without one of their 6 guys, which is honestly really impressive. So I think Chris can get there, but you never know these days. So I think it's all hopium copium at this point.
I do appreciate you mentioning that the Celtics won without one of their guys, because that seems to get overlooked quite a bit when mentioning the Celtics. Yeah. So I personally
that's why it's nice to have 6 of them. Exactly. 5 out of 6 is a bigger margin than 2 or 1 out of 3.
It's nice while we got it. Although Peyton Pritchard's making a case to make it 7 here, so we'll see what that looks like. But sticking with the Bucks in this season. So the last time the Celtics and Bucks met, it was a competitive game earlier in the season, but that was really when Bucks and Bucks fans alike were really kind of going through it, and that the start of the season just got rough. Basically started 3-8, but you guys have climbed back 8-2 in your last 10, now 11-10, coming off a loss to the Hawks, who are a little bit frisky, and you guys could see in the NBA Cup, which we'll talk about briefly here in just a minute. But going from that 3-8 start to now getting back to 11-10, and kind of sitting right about still obviously not the standards that have been set in the Giannis era of where the Bucks want to be, but talk to me a little bit. What's been the key to the turnaround from 3-8 to 11-10 without there being, Chris Middleton, like we just talked about, hasn't come back yet. So it's been basic. It's been the same group of players. What's changed?
Yeah, and interestingly, I think they were without Dame for 2 or 3 of those and without Giannis for one of them as well. So it hasn't just been a health thing by any means. It's never a positive health thing for the Bucks, unfortunately, it feels like. I think they bought in more defensively / learned the scheme more. That's one of the big – they were – kind of going through the motions or just late or blowing switches and some of their bad losses earlier in the season, which is just never acceptable. Some of those to bad teams too, right? Where they kind of just tried to sleepwalk through and beat the Bulls and the Nets. Teams that don't look as bad as we thought either, in fairness, right? Like I think we kind of expected those teams to be a little worse. They're in the playoff race as well.
But by Eastern Conference standards, they look all right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good caveat. And I think Dame and Giannis clicked. Their role players are shooting a lot better. Gary Trent was on a hellacious shooting slump. Brook Lopez was. And with the volume of threes this year, it can just be difficult if you have multiple guys not knocking them down for a long stretch. And also, I think one of the keys, though, was Doc embracing some of the young players. Andre Jackson Jr. now starting games. AJ Green, one of the 2 or 3 bench players who plays the most in every game.
He is knocked down.
He can shoot it, and he holds up defensively too. He actually just had a bad shooting game against the Hawks, but it's what those happen. But I think those two have brought. I mean, as much as AJ Green brings offensively, they both brought a lot of defensive help too. They kind of are staggered for a lot of the games now, and they've been able to just rotate faster, get out there quicker than someone like a Pat Connaughton, who has had some great games against the Celtics, mostly has been out of the rotation just because defensively has just taken one too many steps back at this point, it seems, unfortunately. But I think it's kind of getting younger, getting faster, acclimating to the defense, and then offensively, they're just in an incredible rhythm right now. I think Dame and Giannis are really playing off of each other as well as ever, better than we've ever seen before, I should say. And the shots they open up for their role players on most of these games are immaculate. And even against the Hawks, I mean, they lost that game. They had a bad first half. Bobby Portis has been a bit of an issue for them defensively, but they had a bunch of chances to even out that game in the second half and just clanked open 3 after open 3, which is just going to happen sometimes. So I think their offense is setting the tone. I think when they turn the ball over, that's when they're at their worst because it's hard for them to get back defensively. But right now, their offense is in a great rhythm, and I think that's been able to set the table for them.
Yeah, especially I think the point you made about Doc finally embracing going a little bit younger, a little bit more athletic. I was looking through some numbers here before, getting ready for the pod today. And, I was looking at some of your guys' lineups, and your 2 most used lineups, I think, just tell basically the entire story. It's, both lineups have Brook Lopez, Dame, Giannis, and Taurean Prince, who, by the way, I don't know what the numbers are updated. He was shooting 54% from 3, which was leading the league on, 4 attempts, which is crazy enough, not high volume given the way the league works. He says, but it's not no volume either, right? Like that's significant volume. And he's shooting 54%. The 4 of them are in both of these lineups. The only difference is Gary Trent Jr. and Andre Jackson Jr. And with Gary Trent, the plus minus is minus 11. And with Andre Jackson, it's plus 17. So not world beating, but a pretty big difference between that. And that's when obviously Chris Middleton will replace somebody within that, right? And then you can move one of those guys to the bench and even out a bit more. So as you're looking at all those role guys that you mentioned, and honestly, Taurean Prince at the beginning of the season, I think defensively he still has some question marks because this is one of those, anyone that covers the NBA, you always have these weird pockets of just, I really like that guy. And I really like Taurean Prince in a role in which he plays about 15 to 18 minutes a game. I think we saw last year with the Lakers, he was playing too many minutes. And I thought the same thing here early on. It seems to be kind of evening out a little bit. And I think with Middleton, you'll even get a better kind of more concentrated stretch of Taurean Prince. But when you look at the role players around, obviously we know Giannis, Dame, Brook, and Middleton, they have to be healthy. That's, like you said, that's the case for any team. But are those role guys good enough around them? Like, how are you feeling about those role guys? And you already mentioned some of the younger guys that have gotten their shot.
Yeah, I feel really good about the number of role guys. I just think they could really use an athletic big coming off the bench because right now, like they're rebounding. They rebound at a really great level with Brook Lopez on the court, and then it flips to like bottom 5 caliber defensive rebound. They never offensive rebound. They just get back. They're too old. They gave it up, which I think is fine. But their defensive rebounding, it falls off a cliff when it's Bobby in there, even if he plays with Brook sometimes. So I just think rim defense and just securing rebounds has just been a problem for them. Whenever the bench comes in, whenever Brook sits, which is why Brook is 36, I think, having one of his best seasons ever, even though the shooting is off and on, like the impact he has is really tremendous. But I think they need that player. They just don't have it. But I think quantitatively, just like the amount of good players they have, they'll be bringing off the bench, I feel pretty good about. I'm assuming it's going to be Prince coming off the bench for Middleton. Not, again, Prince shooting up to 55.5% from 3. It's not.
It went up since I last
It went
checked.
up. Yeah. Ridiculous heater he's on. It's not demoting him, but it's just, I think you're a little big and not defensive enough if it's Dame, Prince, Middleton, Giannis,
Right.
Brook. I mean, the last two are still taking away the rim. That's obviously still the backbone of their defense, but I just think you're losing too much on the perimeter. But some combination of like Prince, AJ Green, Gary Trent, who's really come along now and played much, much better, shooting the ball more, defending better off of the bench. That's three, I think, good kind of rotational players. You've got DeLon Wright, who I don't think has done well as a Buck so far. He may end up getting what we call Torrey Craig, which is, signed and then moved on somewhere mid-season. Actually, Ryan Rollins, another one of the young players, looked phenomenal standing in for him. Had a shoulder injury, has not played much since then. That's a big kind of thing Bucks watchers are looking for is, will Rollins get another shot? He started and had a 5 threes made, 5 steals game. It's against the Raptors, so, ease it a little, but still, that's pretty impressive production from the young player. So that's one to watch if he'll get more minutes. But I think that's a good amount of bench players. We know in a playoff series, you're not going to be going 10 deep most of the time. I do, though, worry about Portis, just the way he's defended when his shot isn't on. It's just been really difficult for them to sustain, high level of play with him on the court. So that's the one area I'm worried about. But, you look at him, he was like 8th man of the year last year. I think he was 3rd in the 6th man voting, an objectively good player, I suppose, but that's the one hole I see for them. But I like overall their amount of players that I would trust at least some to play in a playoff game.
When you look at the matchup with the Celtics specifically, what troubles you the most?
That's a good question. I mean, it's always just defending that many players. I actually think this has been my take since the beginning of last season. I think the Celtics struggle against the Bucks a little bit. I know they've done well, but I'm just like, comparatively, because I think they just see too much food defensively, and sometimes they get lazy because of it. Like they'll settle for just trying to ISO guys, when I think if they ran more of their normal drive kick, create the advantage offense, they would be better off. I feel like they settle for jumpers against the Bucks because they're like, oh, I'm just going to take this jumper over Dame, or last year Malik Beasley, this year AJ Green, whoever it may be. But it's always just trying to guard that many players at once, right? When you're going to have Middleton making his season debut, no idea how he's going to look. Dame, I think, waffles between okay and kind of bad defensively, depending on what you ask him to do. If he's around the rim, he's not going to stop either of the Jays. Going through screens hasn't been great. He's had some kind of nice help defense. He'll cut down to the nail and grab a ball every once in a while, but not a defensive first player, not someone you can really trust to guard the Jays. So it's just kind of trying to field lineups that can defend for, useful players on ball enough. That's the hardest thing, especially the volume in which the Celtics shoot threes. I think historically the Bucks have been pretty good at hanging in there and not just like getting totally shredded by Boston's offense. And I think defensively they're on a bit of a run, but I think the biggest issue for them in this game, and anytime they play anyone, but it's more of an issue against Boston, if Drew and White are healthy and they're able to force turnovers, then I think that it can get scary for Milwaukee quickly. That's where they can't keep up. They need good half-court possessions on offense and in order to survive defensively, because it's too difficult already to guard these guys in the half court, especially now with Porzingis back. We know spacing out Brook is a big issue as well. That's going to be something to watch. So there's a lot, I think, to be worried about here. I'm not even used to this team with Porzingis because it's been so long, but always 5 out is difficult for Brook in some ways too. So it's going to be really interesting. Like, is he on Drew? How much does Drew make you pay? They were playing a zone. So there's a lot to worry about, frankly, when you're playing the Boston Celtics, which I don't like saying, by the way. Some Bucks fans might listen to this and go, oh, he's, paying homage to the Celtics. He's on the podcast. I don't enjoy this, but I do think, I owe it to myself and people who listen, right? Like to be factually accurate. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I try to tell people.
Doesn't make me feel good though.
Like obviously I'm biased towards the Celtics, but I just have realism in my bones, right? Being self-aware is something I'm very proud of on a day-to-day basis, or trying to be. And we can't always be because we're fanatics, right? That's how it works. Mm-hmm. But there is a realism to it. And I think the Celtics-Bucks matchup is always kind of fascinating because, Giannis is one of the few guys that definitively, I don't think there's a question, if they were to play in a playoff series, Giannis is the best player in the series. Now, I have my own issue with, I think the best player in the series wins. I think once you get past the first round, I don't really think that actually holds as much weight as we give it, because usually you're playing a guy like it's a Tatum versus Giannis matchup. It's a Giannis versus Embiid. It's like, one guy might be better, but it's not enough of a difference or a separator. But
it's got to be close for that to be the true determinant.
Exactly.
I think, in the teams.
Like when it's a Giannis versus Tyler Hero. Oh yeah, I think the Bucks are probably going to have a pretty good advantage in that scenario. But I want to get you out of here with this last couple of things here. And the first one is this the best Giannis has ever played? Because Giannis has looked absolutely amazing. And even when the Bucks were struggling, this was the difference between them and the Sixers, who they were kind of getting lumped together with those early season struggles. Is Giannis is playing, Embiid is not. Giannis is playing, and he's playing amazing. It's the rest of the team and the coaching that needs to figure it out. Embiid's just not playing, so there's nothing you can do there. Doesn't matter what else Philly was trying to do. Embiid's not playing; he's still not really playing. So we don't know what the hell that is. But Giannis is really on another level, and I think Jokic is the best player in the world. But as much as I love Jason Tatum, Giannis is still, in my opinion, the second best player. Is this for you the best he's ever looked?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, the easy thing to point at here, and, putting aside game 6 of the finals is for a long time probably going to be the peak in terms of single game, but of a sustained period, the way he's shooting the mid-range right now, I think really makes it unfair. It's also a little hard to judge exactly pre and post Dame because he's kind of been like a guaranteed 30 points per game on 60% from the field since Dame arrived, even with how bad things were in Milwaukee. And it's not all Dame, but that impact is clear. I mean, it was unthinkable. And again, I'm not trying to slander Drew or Chris Middleton. It was unthinkable for opponents to be doubling, at half court on a ball handler with Giannis on the court. And that happens now sometimes against the Bucks. So I think that is linked to it and part of it. But in terms of his actual, basketball playing, isolating just him, the midi is he drew a 3-point shooting foul on Isaiah Stewart 2 games ago. Again, that's unthinkable. You never jump at Giannis. That's just a mental mistake regardless. Yeah. But it's because Giannis had made, I think, 5 or 6 mid-rangers in the game to that point. And I really do think it's hard to watch a guy make that shot comfortably and not adjust. Not even if the game plan is, all right, we got to give him the space. We can't let him get to the rim. You're going to take that step. Giannis, with his combination of size and speed and strength, if you give him that extra step, he's probably going to be able to now get to the rim again or open up the shot for someone else. I think his playmaking still pretty underrated. He'll have some turnovers, but he'll sling some ridiculous passes to the shooters as well. He's really good at wrapping around behind the hoop and getting it. He's thrown some ridiculous ones to Taurean Prince this year. So I think, there's a pretty clear case to be made that he is. He defensively, has kind of entered that LeBron era of, all right, not gonna be locked in every single regular season possession, which I'm fine with. I think that's the one place where you could argue there's other versions where maybe 19-20 on both ends, he was more of a wrecking ball. I think his game is certainly more refined though offensively, and when he needs it, the defense can still be there. By the way, somebody suggested in the early season slump, should the Bucks and Sixers just swap Embiid for Giannis? And
that made no sense.
The Bucks people just what was that? Yeah, it's just the guy who's not playing for the guy who's I want to stay here regardless. We're gonna keep trying. Why not? That seems like it's a good idea for the Bucks. Anyway.
Yeah, that was a blasphemous idea. I don't even know why that was put out there.
Why not? 2K, right? Sure.
It's a clickbait. That's the world of clickbait that we live in today. Yeah. But last thing, and I'll get you out of here, Ty. NBA Cup, Bucks advancing. Celtics, unfortunately, based on point differential, not able to advance. But in general, I'm just curious of your thoughts on the NBA Cup. We're now 2 years in, and I've always said, wait for the Bucks to get going in the NBA Cup. 2nd year in a row that you guys have advanced to the knockout stage here. So I'm curious to know what your feeling is 2 years in. And also, I'm just going to pile into this that the Celtics not making the NBA Cup has left them with 3 extra full days off of being able to rest and practice. Actually, I believe it's 4 days off. Let me see here. Yeah, it's 4 consecutive days off with rest, practice, a home game against the Pistons, 2 more days off, followed by a game against the Wizards, followed by 3 more days off. How does that sit with you from a Bucks perspective as far as awesome? You guys are advancing in the NBA Cup. Meanwhile, the number one, threat in your conference is getting basically 2 games in about a 9-day span against the worst team in the league and a lesser team in your conference. Is the trade-off worth it? How does that feel for you as a Bucks fan right now?
I think it is worth it because we're still so far from playoffs that I don't think, frankly, the extra couple days right now are going to directly have an impact when we're getting to late April when, the real season for these teams starts, so to speak. And I think the Bucks team, I do think the Cup group stage games kind of helped get them going when they did have that bad start of just this is a little bit more let's lock in for this. They've talked about these guys that are playing key roles right now, AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr., 500K is a big deal for these guys. We've also discovered like Doc loves a deal. Doc loves to like free stuff and to expense stuff, and the coaches get paid too. So Doc is going to lock in with that check on the line. But I think it's good.
Doc's gonna go to Vegas and get a couple rounds of golf in. That's what Doc's
that too.
about.
I mean, they're also saying Doc, phoned it in the first 2 weeks to make sure he wouldn't have to coach the All-Star game. I'm not sure if that was in question, but like he did last year.
I hadn't heard that one, but I like that.
He didn't enjoy that. He very vocally didn't enjoy that. But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's fun basketball. And I think this is, it makes sense. I think from the Celtics perspective, you would feel that way. Coming off the championship, same core. There's really nothing to prove, right? The only new guy is Baylor Shireman at this point. It's really about get through this healthy, continue to win games. You're not punting or anything.
Listen,
but
it wasn't for a lack of trying. Joe Mazzulla called a timeout with a second left and had Sam Hauser throw up a Hail Mary that went in that gave us a chance. If things had worked out differently in that Magic and Knicks game, the Celtics would be in this mix too.
No, 100%. But I mean, from you specifically, you're like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I don't need this validation. The Bucks, it's like, been a tough time. Would love to win some more important basketball games. I think this is just, with the guys in and out, new schemes and everything. They've updated the coaching staff even since last year with Doc. They need just this opportunity to gel more and just get more big games and come together and keep going in the right direction. So I think it makes sense that like kind of the teams that are in it are in it. I think it's a lot of teams that are kind of in a similar spot with the Bucks of like, we have something to prove. It's really important for us to continue proving this. Whereas Boston, they did try, they were very, very close, but it's like, we're fine. We'll take the days off. Like we know what we're doing. We know who we are. So I think it's good. I also think league wise, it's just the games are fun. It's another little tournament. There was a lot of narratives and stuff last year.
Any
Pacers and LeBron.
Now that you've seen 2 years, is there any specific tweak that you think that would improve? Because I'm with you. I'm in on the NBA Cup.
Yeah.
I think there are some small tweaks needed, but I'm curious to know if there's any that jump to your mind.
I think the courts are a little too ugly. I like the idea. I really like the concept.
Do you know what they should do, Ty?
They stand out.
Have you seen the retro courts that like some teams have this year? Like the Raptors have an awesome one. The Suns have one that kind of references back to the All-Star game. Like, just use those. Use those and throw the NBA Cup logo behind the middle like they used to do for the finals.
That's the number one.
That's it. That's done. Just do that. Like that's simple, cut and dry. And like for a team like the Celtics that doesn't really have a retro, that's okay. That the parquet is like enough of a differentiator, right? You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Or just make it always the regular court, but with that NBA Cup trophy overlay, like the old finals one, because that looks awesome. And you're going to realize when you watch. And I think people will start to get used to like, okay, every Tuesday and Friday in November, these are the cup games. It's always conference games and, it's the standings. But I mean, clearly the teams are into it because you're seeing things like, late last second timeout and, are the Knicks actually going to beat the Magic by 50 and then get them in versus, it was really fun. We joked with Rohan, we should do like the CNN Kornacki thing for the last day next year and just like track the results because it was kind of chaotic until the last second.
That's one of my changes, right? And part of it's because they have 3 groups of 5, so it doesn't really work. But when they expand, then you can do 4 groups of 4 and it changes a little bit because I think that's the hardest issue is that it's not just each group is playing on the same day. So you can't really so it's like this weird, crossover of multiple days and trying to figure it out. But if you can put all the groups together and, one of the ideas that I had is if they're going to keep it in this time frame, try to own the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and try to own Black Friday. So Wednesday is if you have 4 groups of 4, that's the Western Conference, conclusion of group play is that night. And we know all, and you can stagger the times, do the NBA crunch time and kind of get the Kornacki thing going, get the Chris Hansen vibe in there, and then replicate that on Friday, which I mean, they kind of tried to do because they had games starting at noon, right? And then kind of built it up throughout the day. So you can kind of own that day that everybody's home, let football have, Thursday, and they're not dealing with that. So I think there's some little tweaks, but NBA Cup, it's fun. I'll be tuning in. Bucks Magic on Tuesday, right? That's going to be their
I think they're
matchup.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in Vegas if they win for the next one.
Exactly. But before that, Celtics, Bucks, Friday night. Ty, I hope that this is a playoff preview with everybody healthy. I think this is a really exciting matchup. I'm looking forward to it and appreciate you stopping by, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Will. Let's look forward to a great game. And that's all I'll say here. A great game.
There you go. How you will. Leave it on a high note and we'll leave it cordial. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.